Okay, this is counterintuitive, but here's how you change culture. When you're planting something, you preach it, then you do it, right? Explain to people what you're doing. But when you are changing something midstream, don't preach it, do it. I'll explain why I say that. Because as a planter, there is no history that you're changing, right? And so there's not particular resistance. You're just recruiting people to the vision. So you preach, this is what we're going to be like. This is the kind of church we're going to be and all that. And then you go and do it, and you're creating DNA and corporate culture. But what is corporate culture? Corporate culture is the way things are done here, right? So if you're changing something that exists and you cast the vision too broadly, you're setting up resistance because people resist change. I tell people, just change. You know how it is in church circles. First year, it's, wow, we never did it that way. Second year, what's this? Third year, oh, we always do it this way. So I tell successor pastors, quit preaching your vision, do your vision, and you will lessen the resistance. It's completely counterintuitive. Because when you cast vision and you say we want to go here and everybody's gone there, all kinds of PhD studies have been shown on the adoption curve. And 50% of people are late adopters. They want to know that it's already working and who else is for it. So if you're preaching it on the front end, you just cause 50% of people to resist you who might not even have noticed the changes. Does that make sense? And my latest leadership book is called Innovation's Dirty Little Secret. And it's really about how do you innovate and change within an organization. It makes that distinction between when you're a startup and you have only a future to create, or when you're 4 or 5 years into it, by then you have a past to protect and a future to create. And we don't realize that. I'm sure you guys have some things to add to that.
I think one of the things that Larry said is that's really important is to realize that changing a culture in any area, whether it's your staff culture or something, it's going to take time, and it takes typically a minimum of 3 years. So your patience and your investment in that is important. So I think investment in your staff before you start trying to change everything is as critical as wanting to see that change happen.
I think the only thing I would really add to that is that the element that must remain is change. That's the very nature of what the church does, is transformation. And so it is the culture of change, not for change's sake, but because that's who we are and what we do with the gospel, that is so instrumental to our church. And I think I would want to write down as much of descriptions of that culture as I could articulate, and constantly grab little stories about it that really gave evidence and skin and flesh and bone to what I was trying to articulate. And then I would celebrate those things in front of people to show them.
Yeah, because I left out something that's very important. I would articulate exactly the culture you want. We call them plumb lines and sound bites. I just don't preach it. I just start doing it. And then later on, Jesus said something profound about leadership in terms of his statement about wine, and most people only know part of it. That you put new wine goes in what? New wineskins. But what else did he say? I say all this all the time to hundreds of pastors, and they look at me blank. See if anybody here knows. Because it's just as profound. And I remember the first time it hit me like, oh, what an idiot. How did I miss this? No one who has tasted the old wants the new. That is equally profound when you're working through change. Because I used to think if you love Jesus, you'll learn to like a subwoofer. And so I would beat up the older saints in our church as we constantly had to change. And I gave that up long ago. We have a service called Traditions. And I no longer think that just because people love Jesus, they're going to change their taste. No one who has tasted the old wants the new. And you know, anybody with a good wine closet, they'll nod on that. And so that's part of why I don't want to talk to them either. You just make the changes, and one day they go, this isn't so bad. What's it called? Ages well.
Brian, the other thing I would say very practically, I know many people would not agree with this. What we did is we knocked down all the walls in our offices and went to a completely community office. I've been living in this culture now for about 4.5 years. Again, I know everyone would say they need their own space, they need their own time, and there's places to do that. But for us, it's been unbelievably helpful to all be in one office. With the rise of pornography in the office of pastors and ministry leaders, obviously you can still struggle with it in any regard, but man, Brian, it's beautiful to be in one office with all of this crew and just daily feeling like we're actually living life together. On the other piece of that, what I believe is if I don't know how I can be praying for, in our case, these men, then how in the world can a culture be changed, you know? And so quite honestly, we spend about just as much time praying for one another, praying for one another's hearts, praying through one another's struggles, as we do trying to fix all of our many gaps. And I think a lot of times, especially in a young church plant or as it develops, you know, all you're doing is evaluating, creating, fixing, and your staff guys and the guys you're co-laboring with are absolutely dying because they're not feeling shepherded, they're not feeling loved, they're feeling like pieces of meat. But because you all feel that way together, you just justify it like that. But hey, we're all in this together. No, like, you know, one of the most critical aspects of our shepherding is our own heart, our own connection with the Lord, gospeling each other, you know. So I hope that answers your question. What else, Larry?
Well, I would add to that because that's a good example of something that's pretty important. I always tell church, I do a little talk how to plant a church and still have a life. And the first point is plant the church you'd want to go to. You're not planting the church that's going to change your community or reach everybody. We're all Sunday school classes, elective Sunday school classes in his church in our community. And what that means is, in a case like yours, that's a reflection, I'm pretty sure, of your extroversion, your personality. And it's a wonderful thing because there's a clear sense of, if you can't work in that environment, you shouldn't be on our staff, but it doesn't mean you're not qualified to serve Jesus somewhere. That's the kind of church we're going to have. Then you're going to have another church that's led by introverts where everybody turns their desk towards the wall. You know, I'm an extrovert. At one point, I made everybody turn their desk towards the outside because it worked for me. But then all my introverts freaked out and couldn't get anything done. So at the end of the day, where I think you'll figure out how to make these kind of changes is figure out who God called you to be, accept the mantle He called you to be the leader now, and lead in the direction of the church and the staff you'd want to have. And one might be one that prays all the time. One might be one that plays together all the time. One might be one that has long devotional Bible studies together. One might be one that dreams together. It's going to reflect the personality. It's funny to me, we preach the body of Christ, but we don't believe the body of Christ.